Today we're going to talk about travel insurance, everyone's favorite topic. So what is travel insurance? To put it simply, travel insurance is insurance. It's there to cover expenses in the event of unplanned incidents that occur when you're traveling. In this video, I will cover why travel insurance, the main types of travel insurance, detailed coverage options, other criteria to consider, coverage you may already have, and plan and price option comparisons. I see a constant stream of posts online asking whether or not a traveler should get insurance. The short answer is absolutely. If your trip is delayed, your luggage is lost, or God forbid, you have an accident or get horribly sick, travel insurance could save you critical time and money. Now, with any luck, you won't have to use a penny of it, but the peace of mind that it brings makes it 100% worth the expense. In some cases, your existing credit card company or medical insurance may already cover you, but I'll discuss this more in detail later. To start us on the road to understanding insurance, there are two main types: travel insurance and medical travel insurance. Standard travel insurance will typically cover things like trip cancellations, interruptions, delays, baggage, rental cars, emergency medical and dental expenses, and evacuation in the event of an emergency. It does not typically cover standard medical needs like prescriptions and checkups. On the other hand, medical travel insurance will typically cover standard medical and dental expenses comprehensively and more similarly to a domestic medical plan. It may also cover prescriptions, maternity, and other day-to-day medical needs not covered by standard travel insurance. However, it does not typically cover trip issues like cancellations, interruptions, delays, or other non-medical issues. All types of travel insurance also typically have three subtypes based on the duration of your trips: single trip, multi-trip, and long-term. Your options for insurance will vary based on what you want and need. So let's review possible coverage you may want. Then we can review different plan options in a handy spreadsheet I've created. Medical coverage may include medical expenses, which could be emergency expenses such as a trip to the emergency room, or may actually be doctor visits and prescriptions. Evacuation and repatriation. This is if for some reason you need to be evacuated to the nearest hospital or all the way home to your home country. Repatriation simply means getting you back into your country of origin. Pre-existing conditions. Many insurance options will not cover pre-existing conditions, but some do have an option available. There are typically conditions that apply, but you can call the insurance company to find out what those are. Primary versus secondary insurance. Some plans are primary, which means they'll be the first to pay when something happens. Others function as secondary insurance and may or may not require you to have a primary insurance, but will pay out after the primary insurance if you have it. Dental coverage. Dental coverage could mean an emergency only, so if you fall and break a tooth, or it may include actual dental health care, such as visiting a dentist for a cavity. Adventure sports. This may interest a lot of you, so you'll want to know whether or not adventure sports are covered. In some cases, if you're doing an extreme sport when you're injured, it will not be covered by your travel insurance, so be sure to check. Accident and liability. This means that if you're in an accident or you cause an accident, the insurance will cover the claims from other parties, as well as your own accident expenses. Family coverage. Most of what I'm looking at is for folks traveling alone, but if you're traveling with a family, you'll need to know whether or not you and all your party are covered, or whether you have to get separate plans for each person in the family. Prescriptions. Pretty self-explanatory. Are prescriptions covered and at what percentage? Maternity. Also hopefully self-explanatory, but for pregnancy and delivery. Accidental death and dismemberment. Hopefully this one is pretty obvious. And pet care. If you have an extended stay in a hospital and you had pets back home that need to be taken care of, some insurances will cover for a certain duration of pet care. Okay, those are most of the typical coverage options for medical insurance. Now let's talk about the travel insurance. This includes trip interruption. If something happens during your trip that interrupts it and you cannot continue on, each plan will have its own included incidents in that case. Trip cancellation. If your trip is canceled, this typically has to happen before you actually leave for the trip. And again, there are certain reasons that are covered and certain reasons that are not. Cancel for any reason. This is often an add-on that you can pay extra for, which allows you to cancel the trip for absolutely any reason that happens, and it will be covered. Trip delay. If your airline delays your trip, or you have some other covered reason, this will cover expenses related to paying for food or overnights in a hotel when your trip is delayed. Baggage delays and loss. These are usually listed as two separate line items in insurance. One covers the loss of your luggage and typically has items listed that are covered or not covered. And the other covers a baggage delay. So in case you need to buy an extra set of clothing or something while you're waiting for your luggage to arrive. Missed connection. This should be pretty explanatory, but if you miss a connection for any covered reason, such as the airline delays a plane or something like that, then they'll reimburse you and help you typically find a new flight. Weather and terrorism. Most of the insurance companies that have interruption or cancellation typically have line items for weather and terrorism. There are conditions applying to these as to when the terrorist act occurred and what kind of weather event it is, so you'll want to check on this. Identity theft. This is almost always an add-on option, but for some of the more expensive plans may be included, and will help you recover your identity in the event that someone steals your credit card or tries to pose as you when purchasing things. Rental car. Again, this is usually an add-on, but for some of the more expensive plans, you'll receive coverage in the event of an accident with your rental car. This is great because then you don't have to get the insurance through the rental car company. Business equipment. Some insurance plans are specifically for business travels and will cover their equipment in the event something happens to it. Security evacuation. This is also usually a part of a business travel insurance plan and covers evacuating someone out of the country in the event that their security is at risk. Legal expenses. Hopefully self-explanatory, but in the event that a court has to be involved in something that occurs, you may have your legal expenses covered. Cruise-specific insurance. Some insurances offer cruise-specific insurance. You'll have to select this if you're going on a cruise, and it is separate from regular travel insurance, so make sure you know about it. Crew, educator, and missionary insurance plans. These plans are separate from other types of insurance plans, so if you're part of the crew of a ship, or you're a teacher going abroad, or you're a missionary, you'll want to make sure that you understand which plans exist for your work. In addition to all of these typical options, you'll also want to consider other criteria that's relevant to your situation. For example, your country of citizenship. Many of the insurance plans that I'll go over in this video are for the United States. However, there are also quite a few that cover additional countries. So depending on where you're located, you'll want to search for travel insurance companies that are for citizens of your country. Home country versus international coverage. Specifically, medical plans, at least for U.S. citizens, only cover you abroad if they're medical travel plans. Most of the other travel insurance companies, however, cover you as long as you're more than 100 miles from home. So just make sure you understand where you're covered in the world. Trip max duration. Depending on whether you're traveling for 1 day, 365 days, 3 months, 5 years, the plans that are available to you depending on the length of your trip will vary greatly. If you're traveling for 1 day, certain plans will not be available. And if you're traveling for 365 days or more, you'll be definitely limited to which plans you can get. Also, as I mentioned before, there are multi-trip plans, but these typically also have trip length limitations. So if you're planning to take multiple trips during the year, you can pay for an entire year of coverage, but you typically can only stay for, say, 30 to 90 days on each trip, and you have to return home between trips. Schengen visa and other country requirements. The Schengen countries are located in Europe, and you can only stay in them for a maximum of 90 days without a visa. So if you're planning to apply for a Schengen visa, you need to have certain requirements met with your insurance. Other countries may have other requirements on insurance, so make sure you check before you travel. Exclusions. One of the exclusions that I look at in my spreadsheet is the alcohol exclusion, as I've seen it mentioned before online. Most insurance companies exclude alcohol-induced illness, meaning if you drink too much and get alcohol poisoning, your travel insurance is not going to cover it. Other exclusions often apply, so be sure you look through the list before you buy the insurance. Public versus private hospitals. Most insurances will let you go to any hospital and cover it, but that's not always the case. Some of them will only cover if you're in a public hospital. Renewable policy. If you're traveling long term, you'll want to know if you can renew the policy each year or month, depending on how you want it to work. Age restrictions. Many policies have age restrictions, so if you're above a certain age, your policy is going to cost more or may not be available from certain insurance companies. Concierge services. Insurance companies sometimes offer concierge services. They'll help you find English-speaking doctors. They'll help you find new flights if you have a delay or a cancellation. So check out what kind of services they'll offer if that's something you're looking for. Customer service and claim time. I highly recommend at least calling and understanding how long their customer service wait time is in case you have an incident while you're overseas. Claim times you likely won't encounter unless you actually have an incident, but you may want to research online to see what other people have said about the claim times of certain insurance companies. Now let's take a look at coverage you may already have and don't realize. First, check with your current credit card companies. I use the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, which comes with basic travel insurance for trips up to 60 days. Call the companies and see what they offer before you go buying something you don't need. Next, check with your health insurance company. Depending on your citizenship and the company and plan you have, you may be covered for certain trips and durations. Most likely, if you're in the United States, though, and traveling abroad, your existing health insurance will not cover you. Now that you know what coverage you already have and what options are available, we'll do some comparing using this handy spreadsheet. As you can see, I've laid out companies and their plans down the left, typical critical options across the top, along with pricing and additional criteria. I did not include every possible variable we discussed, so you can use this as a starting point, but you'll want to call each company you're considering for full plan details and any conditions and exclusions that apply. Understand that this spreadsheet is intended as a starting guide only and may contain missing or incorrect information. That said, I have included only accurate information to the best of my ability, and as it is an ongoing project, you may see blank cells that represent data I was unable to find or have not completed. If you'd like to use this spreadsheet, I've included the Google Sheets link below. You can make a copy of it for your own private use. I have also enabled commenting on the sheet, so if you find an error or want to help populate it, please feel free to add comments to the cells. Now that we have that out of the way, let's begin with the pricing. In order to make viable comparisons on this spreadsheet, I used an example of a 35-year-old American living in Florida and traveling to Europe, or Spain if Europe was not available by the insurance selectors, for 60 days from the beginning of March until the end of April, with an estimated trip cost of $8,000. Unless otherwise indicated, the prices on this spreadsheet are in US dollars. You'll notice in the price column that in some cases it'll say something like per year, per month, or per trip. This is because the particular plan was not available for a day-length duration, such as 60 days, and they charge either annually, by the month, or for multi-trip insurance, they charge per trip. If you see nothing after the dollar amount, then you'll know this is an equivalent comparison for a 60-day trip. So for example, with World Nomads, it's $272 for the Explorer option and $189 for the Standard option, both for a 60-day trip next year. For each plan, you can hover over the different cells to see comments that I've made. So you can see in the Explorer plan, it covers up to $100,000 of medical expenses, and the Standard plan also covers $100,000. You can move across the cells to see what the differences are. In this case, evacuation coverage is up to $500,000 with Explorer, but only $300,000 with Standard. Obviously, with the prices being less, the coverage is going to be different as well. I'm not going to go through this entire spreadsheet, but I'll just review what the different columns are and other key things I've included to help you along. For each company, I've included the phone number you can call to get more information, as well as a link to their website when you click on the company name. In most cases, I've included all the different plans that the company offers. However, I did not include any sort of missionary or crew insurance or other types of specialty insurance that wouldn't be comparable with what we have on this spreadsheet. For medical, I've got the standard expenses, and in some cases these are only for emergencies, so you'll want to check their exclusions. Evacuation, whether or not they have an option for pre-existing medical conditions. Whether they're considered the primary insurance, or whether they're only going to pay secondarily after another insurance pays first. If they include dental, trip interruption, trip cancellation, missed connections, trip delays, baggage loss and delays, weather, and terrorism. I've also included some of the additional criteria we talked about. What citizenship you should have in order to use this insurance, whether or not they cover you in their home country, and in most cases, if they do cover you in your home country, you're going to have to be at least 100 miles away from home. The max duration of the trip. This is very important, especially for something like a multi-trip plan. If I scroll down here, this Trekker Choice and Trekker Essential from GeoBlue are multi-trip plans. So you can see they're renewable. And if I scroll over, the price is by trip. But each trip can only be 70 days long. And in between trips, you'll need to return to your home country. However, if you're going on long-term travel, the Explorer plans from GeoBlue Travel are annual, which means your trip can be as long as you want and you can renew it as you go. But note that GeoBlue Travel is a medical insurance company and does not offer standard travel insurance, so you'd also have to have separate travel insurance through another company or through your credit card. Next, we have the Schengen Countries. Many of the insurance companies that I contacted did not know what Schengen visa was. However, GeoBlue Travel and some of the health insurance companies, they do know, so they'll list it. You can easily check out what the Schengen visa requirements are and see if the coverage that's available, for example, let's scroll over, it typically has to do with medical coverage. You can see if what it covers is enough for the visa requirements or whichever other country's requirements you're looking into. Alcohol exclusion, as I mentioned, most have this exclusion. Health insurance companies such as GeoBlue, I do not believe will have this, so you'll want to check with them if that's a concern for you. However, the regular just travel insurance companies that just cover emergency medical and emergency dental, they typically will have an alcohol exclusion. So if you have alcohol poisoning from drinking too much, you will not be covered. Identity theft options, as I mentioned, these are going to be found on the more expensive plans. Rental car coverage, you can see most of the time it costs an additional $9 a day is what I've found, and whether or not you can renew the plan. So you can go through here and compare the different plans and see the prices. Again, this platinum plan from AIG Travel Guard is $744 for the 60 days that I entered. You can go online and see how much it would be for the duration of your own trip, but you'll see it's much higher than almost every other plan, but that's because it includes the most coverage. It includes almost every particular option. It's for an entire, you can get it for an entire 364 days. And they include additional bonuses like identity theft coverage. I did reach out to Chase Sapphire Reserve to see what kind of coverage they had. Now, in my particular example, I want to travel for a year or more. And one of my friends actually texted me when I said I was working on this video to say, hey, why don't you just use your credit card's coverage? But I went online and I checked out their details and I called them on the phone just to verify everything. And they only cover you for a maximum of 60 days. So this won't work for me. So I need to continue to find something where the max duration, usually max durations are going to be 365 days, or they'll tell you that it's just annual and you can go ahead and renew it. So what I have at the top here are all the plans that are what you would think of as typical travel insurance. As you scroll further down, starting with this GeoBlue, these GeoBlue options, you can see the range of pricing varies a little differently than the travel insurance. This is because it's typical medical insurance. So the price actually varies based on the deductible you choose and whether you're going to have any sort of co-insurance and what you want your max coverage to be, because you can select it because it's more like a medical insurance plan. I found things like GeoBlue Travel, Nationwide, Cigna, and IMG to be a lot more complicated to look at because they look like regular medical insurance plans. You can opt into different options, whether you want to have maternity coverage, whether you want to have prescription coverage. So your pricing can vary a lot greater. So understanding whether or not you actually want complete medical coverage or if you just want it for emergencies is probably one of the first things you're going to want to do, so that if you don't have to deal with these medical insurance companies, it'll make your life a lot easier. As you can see, I haven't gotten to calling the last couple here, and there's probably more out there if you want to make suggestions of other companies I should look into. It takes a lot of time just to go through. I've gone through each of the policy documents to fill this in, and then I typically have to call them to find out things like whether or not it's renewable. Sometimes it doesn't tell you exactly if some of the things are covered that I have listed here, so you may have to call them to find out. Finally, at the bottom here, I have a couple of outside the US. Insure and Go actually covers the UK, Ireland, and Australia, and AA Travel Insurance covers the UK. They may have separate websites for other countries, but what I looked at was the UK. So I have a couple of options down here. As you can see, it's significantly less expensive if you are a UK citizen than an American citizen. So please go ahead and take a look through this spreadsheet. You can make comments right within the spreadsheet, so you can right-click on a cell and you'll be able to insert a comment. Might be the only option available for you. Also, feel free to go, when you look at this, you'll be able to go to File and make a copy. If you'd like to use it yourself, add other criteria in, you can add additional columns, and that way you can track the information that you need for making your own decision. In conclusion, travel insurance options are diverse and complicated. Start by understanding what you already have for coverage. Then list out what options you need. Visit different company websites for quotes and fill in the requested information. Use my chart as a template or start one of your own. Now that you understand the basics of available coverage, it should make it easier to find the plan that's right for you. If you have feedback or suggestions, please comment below, and please like the video and subscribe to my channel for more lessons on travel and business. Next week, I'll be talking about how I stay organized using online tools. Thank you for joining me and stay tuned.